The Caleb Burke campsite had a whole slew of ways to indoctrinate their members. Some were mentally torturous compared to when they first gathered their group, according to some who had managed to escape and were reevaluated via therapy. One way in particular was by using a monochromatic artist to create cartoons, quote-unquote, for Wednesday morning assemblies, using IPs that were very well known for their time to connect with younger troops, such as Caillou and Little Bear. For the teens, they were shown what would be considered as adult in their time. Searching for these tapes are nigh impossible, as the campsite was burned to the ground due to a forest fire, and many were still inside the headmaster's den, either narrowly surviving but corrupted to hell and back, or burnt to a crisp. Only one of the other tape didn't succumb to the hellish flames, the only reason being that the campsite's meetings were sprawled out between halls for youth and elders. The inferno was later put out by the Forest Service before just barely reaching the children's meeting room. Said tape still in the VCR. Its real title has since been unknown, but urban legend connoisseurs coined the nickname Dead Bart. Rumor has it that Dead Bart was just finished at the period it was shown, as every other tape in Caleb Burke's archive supposedly had labels, many of which were smudged with ash and soot. Labels that were somewhat legible gave off odd, sickeningly sweet titles, presumably to mask the fact that they were mentally manipulating their target audience. I should know. I was tagged a rookie in the congregation, and I saw everything. The fake program kicked off like The Simpsons normally would, the only difference being that this was clearly recorded by a separate camera, pointing directly at a boxed television, like if some child attempted to keep part of the show to watch later, but had no clue how to time shift. It may be worth noting that there was a label stuck to the VCR reading for research purposes only. When the quote-unquote episode began, the art style from the intro completely swapped, mostly contrasting the colorful, digitally painted technique that the show once had. It was sketchy, the line art of the characters themselves being miles more intricate than the backgrounds, likely to save time. I did hear from around the camp that our artist had a deadline for each short he was making, so it was probably that reason. The characters, though? They technically acted like themselves, but it felt like one emotion of theirs was cranked up to full volume, completely toppling over what they once were. Homer was unreasonably angry, Marge was anxious, Lisa was nervous, but insistently trying to lighten the mood. And then there's Bart, having this spiteful, hateful attitude towards his family. Cue Act 1. Bart sat at the dinner table with his family, barely eating, the only noise being the clicking of forks and knives. He sighed, staring down at his plane ticket to Arizona, before Marge snapped him out of his minor trance. "Bart, please eat." Bart scoffs, opening his mouth wide after talking back to his mother. "Do you not see steak in my mouth, Mom?" "Close your damn jaw or I'll do it for you," Homer scowls, his fist pounding against the dinner table, leading to everyone falling silent. Lisa pats him on the back in a poor attempt to calm him down, but her wrist is gently smacked away, indirectly informing her that she wasn't helping, to which she doesn't get the hint at later on. Rolling his eyes, Bart continues eating, periodically shoveling cut-up bits of meat into his mouth, finishing up faster so that he could get out of there. Admittedly, even while this was supposed to be serious, the dialogue still felt a little comedic at first, like a scene that would usually show up in The Simpsons. I guess they did end up watching a few episodes to get the full experience into play. My only question is, who did they get to voice over this? Even I couldn't recognize everyone by their voice tone alone. About a minute goes by of Lisa trying to calm her father down by shooting in some small talk, and slowly failing due to accidental bad wording choices about the place he works for, the building up of frustration ultimately making him focus on Bart instead, whose cheeks were stuffed up with all the food on his plate, before he painstakingly swallowed all of it whole. Not all of the sustenance fit down his throat, though. A few pieces of pre-chewed asparagus and beef flew from his mouth and onto Homer's arm from the harsh coughing. "Bart!" Wheezing. "Oh, you just love to scream our ears off, don't you, fat ass? You think I'm meant for that to happen? You never go after anyone else. It's like I'm your picnic Petey. Sweetie, I hate seeing you like this. Please calm down. Bart rudely cuts in. You're not helping, Marge. Homer had enough and rammed the kitchen table out of the way before stomping over to Bart, fingers twitching to crooked twigs. Instead of strangling him like he normally would, he picks up his son by the collar of his shirt and raises a fist, preparing a good punch to the baby teeth. However, as soon as he hears hyperventilating behind him, Homer hesitates, feeling awful for frightening the only two people who stuck up for him, let alone ask him how his day went just for the sake of it. He groans. 2 weeks. 2 whole weeks of your rotten attitude. I hope you realize what damage you've been causing, punk. Heh. I guess the constant bickering and fighting between us really came back to hit you in the face. Ever thought that's why I hate you? Even though I'd get sick of it eventually? Homer, sweating from his head to his underarms, eases his grip, still on the brink of exploding. As much as I want to leave you here, your mother doesn't want that. You're gonna go on that trip with us, and you're gonna like it, ruin it, and I'll work you until you bleed. Whatever. Bart leaves the room to go upstairs, but not before turning around and getting the last word in. Surprised you didn't wake her up. A few seconds of the rest of the family, idly in the kitchen, flies by, signifying the gravity of what had just happened. Instantly cut to the upstairs with Bart tiptoeing inside the darkened room, fit for an infant, until he reaches a wooden oak crib. His not-so-tranquil gaze tilts downwards, and he sighs. If only I was lucky as you. We get a shot of Maggie, barely swaddled up and sucking on her binky. Instead of crying right as soon as she wakes up, she smiles and waves her hands around, wanting to be held by her big brother. All of that overwhelmingly frustrated Bart could muster up the courage to do was stick his hand in there and clutch onto her finger. Just looking at Maggie's happy, carefree expression made his doubts become more apparent. Cut to black. Does luck really matter, though? When you really could just grow up to be like me? We get a scene switch to the airplane taking off. This wasn't drawn or animated, it was footage taken directly off the same television set from the beginning, possibly an advert or a news report, followed by a sketch of Bart sitting next to Homer, staring off from the viewer's point. They intermittently locked eyes and then broke contact. Obviously, this was meant to be some sort of brainwashing scheme for the teens, some broken message about honoring your loved ones before marriage round, and to be honest, I could tell many of us in the meeting were completely uninterested, some of us getting ready to fall asleep even. What we didn't know, and what we were not prepared for, was a trick up our headmaster's sleeve, to twist our wrist into getting the memo. The scene swaps to the Simpsons family roaming the damp orange mountains of the Grand Canyon. Rain is showering against every rock, and Lisa's the only one clutching onto her father's grip. She shivers, already paranoid, but still putting on a happy face. Are you sure we should be visiting at this time of day? Why not go out to brunch instead? At least the weather improves. Homer responds in a monotone. I'm not letting a couple of drizzles ruin our trip. Come on, let's go get a photo. Homer proposes that they take turns, in which when they reach the ledge of the incredibly tall valley, leading to Bart standing by. Cringing at Homer's attempt to bring happiness to his family, the sheer boredom led him to scanning the mountaintop for something to do. Bart fools around as he normally would in the show, frightening birds away from a lone brush, throwing rocks at people while hiding behind the bigger ones, and finally climbing over the railings to shout obscenities at the sky. This catches the attentions of the Simpsons family just as Homer is about to snap a photo of Lisa, who is begrudgingly forcing a smile. Marge approaches Bart amidst a crowd of people who are also frightened, trying to persuade him. Carefully, she puts the poor, confused Maggie in Lisa's arms. Bart, sweetie, hold still and let me help you. Homer interrupts, racing up to the railing. A major shiver is present within his voice. Are you out of your mind, boy? Get off that ledge now! The bald man's desperate attempts to pick up Bart were all in vain. All he could do was grab onto with the raindrops trickling from above, his clothes stained with wetness. Instead of being rageful against his son like in the beginning, Homer was terrified. Bart waltzes across the slippery rocks, laughing with glee. Or what? You gonna be angry? Like I haven't heard that threat 1,000,000 times over. Before Bart could even finish his sentiment, He takes one wrong step and slips, falling off the cliff he stood upon. The frame freezes as soon as Bart trips, and the audio falls mute, cutting to different angles of him in midair, each shot playing the quiet tick of a clock. Tick, tick, tick. 6 of them, to be exact. When we were given the next scene, we could tell that it was clearly recorded in a different area of the camp. The lighting was very bare bones, like the footage was taken in a dingy cabin, or some sort of hallway at night. Presumably, in the room next to whoever was taking the video, a group of women were sobbing, likely the teenagers of our group. Bart wakes up in a speed eagle position against the background, harshly scribbled with a velvet-colored pencil. Struggling to move his limbs only prolonged his unshackled misery before he could even be introduced to it. In came his supposed captor. A nameless bird-faced, robed captor that everyone in the audience looked up to and righteously feared, me unfortunately included. I never wanted to sit through the agony of what it could do to us if we disobeyed, but talking the latter would have left me in shambles. The sight of his jailer only made Bart struggle harder and then stop. Having and trying to catch a breath instead of voice acting, a quotation appeared next to the enslaved head in cursive. Your spirit was sucked away as soon as your scalp touched the earth. Much love, much shame, much misfortune. If only your honor stayed, no crying or begging would present. Joined the shriveled, I will cherish you. That's when Bart's skin began to bubble and burst at the seams, everything on the outside of his core crackling, popping open into worthless slush. By the time he was finally able to move his limbs, it was barely possible to do so. Only slight spasms and jerks were all he could give into his confinement. The scene immediately shifts to the last shot of Act 2, Bart's dismantled, graphically detailed carcass slowly draining on the floor in the rocky abyss. The artist definitely took full advantage of what we were seeing. Practically every body part of his was affected, and he would be unrecognizable if not for his hair still being attached to his scalp. A crowd of people, including what sounded like a baby, howled. Man, was it noisy. It blared through our ears to the point of us plugging them for the rest of the segment. Act 3 opened with a time card. 4 weeks later. The Simpsons household was in a state of mental ruin. Homer sank into the cushions of the family's rugged brown couch, staring at the television, struggling to keep himself awake. The taunting voice of his son echoed throughout his mind. Marge sat next to Maggie at the same dinner table trying to feed her. She held onto the spoon with a shaky clutch, still wide-eyed and shuddering from what she had witnessed. Compared to Marge, Maggie's image seemed completely normal, simply waiting for her next bite, poker-faced. Lisa attempted to play her saxophone, only to continuously botch every note and chuck the instrument at her drawer before curling up against her pillow. Marge and Lisa collectively sat with Homer on the couch, and he would pick up the remote, switching off the sports channel he watched. All of them groaned. Saturdays aren't even fun anymore, Dad. I know, honey, Homer muttered. I know. We then got a moment of silence before Marge speaks up. We shouldn't hold off visiting his grave, homie. It's the least that we can do for him. He wouldn't want us showing up with me around. I should be aware of that by now. Shortly after, the family visits Springfield's graveyard to reflect on Bart's life and say their final goodbyes. Marge is the only one crying, while Homer and Lisa just gaze upon the tombstone in disbelief. Lisa mutters, I want to cry, but I can't. You don't have to cry, honey. You're not the only one he hated before he died. He probably never wanted me to put this behind. Homer averts his gaze to Maggie, peacefully sleeping in his arms, unaware of everything that had just gone down in the past 4 weeks. I can't imagine having to talk about this with her when she's older. If only I were as lucky as you, eh? Before the film came to an end, we slowly got a slowly descending viewpoint of the graveyard, and Bart's decayed remains below the dirt. One aspect of this movie I think is important to note is that every tombstone we had names and dates inscribed on them. Real names of members I knew personally in the campsite and death dates. Those who died long before the making of this tape were of when they passed, but for the ones who were still alive, all of them had the same death date. One day after the campsite torched. to the ground. And that, my little shadows, was Dead Bart. Well, a remake by LafawndaPasta. I hope I'm sitting there and I'm saying your name. So to start this whole thing off, let me just say, happy very late birthday to LafawndaPasta. I hope you had a very great birthday, and I hope you enjoyed your little birthday presents that I'm giving you. Now, this pasta. What can I say about it? Pretty damn good. I haven't done a review for pasta in a long while, but I have to say that, to put it bluntly, the whole story was written perfectly. I love the fact that it still managed to keep the original assets of the original story, but switched it up a bit. It doesn't feel like a rip-off or anything like that, which is amazing. I love the detail that went into the story, the grammar, the structuring, the sentencing, every friggin' thing about the story was just amazingly perfect. Now, with that said, there is one little slight nitpick I would like to say. I feel as though that we didn't really get a whole lot at the end of it. I mean, don't get me wrong, it wasn't entirely a bad ending, but it would have been nice to sit there and get a little bit more information about, say, the camp and everything. I know that we did get a good bit of information and everything at the beginning startup, but truth be told, the whole concept itself is really, really good. I would love for this story to actually be expanded upon a little bit more. Maybe a couple of extra stories about this said camp, maybe? I don't know. But again, it's a small little nitpick, and it doesn't ruin or take anything out of the story. I know that this isn't exactly the review I normally do, and I haven't done one of these, so I'm kind of ad-libbing this. But I would say that this pasta was pretty damn fresh. A good story, written by an amazing author and an amazing narrator on YouTube. So again, happy birthday, LafawndaPasta. I probably fucked up your name, I apologize again, but either way, you did a damn good job. So, my final rating of the story, I would give this a 10 out of 10. Pretty damn good. With that minor nitpick, but again, that nitpick doesn't take away from the story. You're a really damn good, talented narrator, and a talented writer. Keep up the good work. But, like I always say with these videos, and like what I always will continue to say, this is simply my personal opinion, and if you disagree with it, that's perfectly fine too. We're all entitled to our own opinions in regards to creepypastas, and I would love to hear your thoughts. What did you think of this story, and what would you have done to help make the story a lot better? Thanks again for watching, everybody. I'm the Shadow Reader, and like always, roll the outro. Oh wait, I don't have my outro yet, because I'm going to be making a brand new one. So, I might not have an outro for this video, but come for the next one, there will be a brand new one, completely made by me. It's going to take some time, but it's going to be good. Anyway, thanks again for watching, everybody, and like always, I'm out.